Good morning, Virgo. Anna from Virgo here. And someone's emotional state regarding you has shifted into territory they didn't see coming. Subscribe immediately because this depth is intensifying as we speak. There's person in your relational orbit whose feelings for you have escalated beyond what they intended, beyond what they planned, beyond what they can comfortably control. And this isn't surface level attraction that might fade with time or distance. This isn't casual interest they're managing easily alongside other priorities. This is profound emotional investment that's taking them by surprise, disrupting their equilibrium, consuming mental and emotional real estate they thought was allocated to other things, other people, other plans that suddenly feel less important, less compelling, less worth their energy now that you've become a focal point around which everything else orbits, whether they wanted you to become that focal point or not, whether they're comfortable with the intensity of what they're experiencing or terrified by it, whether they know how to handle feelings this deep or feel completely out of their depth, drowning in emotions they can't navigate because they've never felt quite this way about anyone before. Or at least haven't felt this way in so long they'd forgotten. Feelings could be this overwhelming, this all consuming, this impossible to compartmentalize or minimize or dismiss as something manageable that won't affect their daily functioning. This isn't person who's mildly interested and expressing that interest casually, isn't someone who thinks you're attractive and might want to explore possibility if circumstances align is less than hash zero. 5 hash is greater than this is someone who's in deep water emotionally, struggling to keep their head above surface of feelings that keep pulling them under. Someone who thinks about you constantly, who finds you infiltrating their thoughts during moments that have nothing to do with you, who catches themselves smiling when your name appears on their phone, who feels genuine physical response in their body when you're near or when they're anticipating seeing you, whose nervous system has decided you're important, you're special, you're worth paying attention to in ways that override rational decision making about whether getting involved with you is wise or complicated or potentially disruptive to life they've built. Because when feelings reach this depth, wisdom and caution and practical considerations get drowned out by emotional truth that simply is, that can't be argued with or reasoned away or suppressed successfully for extended periods without creating internal crisis that demands resolution. And the plot twist framing, that's indication this wasn't their plan, wasn't trajectory they anticipated when they first encountered you or first started interacting with you. They thought they could keep things light, keep feelings manageable, keep you in category of friend or acquaintance or colleague or whatever box they initially put you in that felt safe, that felt controllable. But somewhere along the way, through accumulated interactions, through moments that seemed small at the time but added up to something substantial, through qualities in you that kept revealing themselves layer by layer until they couldn't unsee your depth, your humor, your kindness, your intelligence, your particular way of being in world that resonates with something fundamental in them. Somewhere along that journey, their feelings shifted from manageable to overwhelming is less than hash zero. 5 hash is greater than, from this person is nice to this person is essential, from I enjoy their company to I need their presence in my life, from casual appreciation to profound attachment that's creating vulnerability they didn't consent to, didn't prepare for, don't know how to handle because it wasn't supposed to happen like this, wasn't supposed to happen at all. And now that it's happening, they're trying to figure out what to do with intensity that won't be ignored, won't be suppressed, won't be rationalized away, no matter how many logical reasons they can list for why falling this hard is inconvenient or complicated or potentially devastating if you don't feel the same way. In the particular disorientation of falling hard when you didn't expect to fall at all, when you thought you were immune or unavailable or simply not in space where romantic feelings could develop, there's element of losing control that's both terrifying and exhilarating, both threatening and thrilling, because falling means not being in charge, means being subject to feelings rather than directing them, means being affected by another person in ways that give them power you didn't grant consciously, power to make you happy with their presence, power to make you sad with their absence, power to occupy your thoughts without trying, power to influence your mood without intending to. And this involuntary quality of deep feeling is what makes it unmistakable, what distinguishes it from crushes or attractions or interests that feel more chosen, more controlled, more like preferences rather than imperatives, more like I could take this or leave it, rather than I need this, even though needing feels dangerous and vulnerable, and like giving someone capacity to hurt me if they want to, or if they simply don't reciprocate what I'm experiencing with escalating intensity. Let me illuminate what specific patterns reveal someone's falling hard rather than just expressing casual interest. In the architecture of deep emotional investment versus surface level attraction, certain behavioral signatures distinguish someone who's genuinely falling from someone who's just interested or lonely or bored. Consistency appears as primary marker. They're not hot and cold, not present and then disappearing, not engaging intensely and then going silent for weeks. They're reliably there, reliably responsive, reliably making effort to maintain connection, even when busy, even when life gets complicated, even when it would be easier to let things slide because connection matters enough that they protect it. They prioritize it. They show up for it in ways that reveal it's not optional for them, not something they engage with when convenient and ignore when not, but essential thread in their daily fabric that they weave into everything else they're doing, everyone else they're seeing, every plan they're making that increasingly includes consideration of you, of your schedule, of your preferences, of your presence or absence as factor that affects their choices in ways they might not even articulate explicitly, but that operates underneath their decision making nonetheless. Your situation likely involves someone demonstrating exactly this kind of consistent presence. They're always engaging with your content if you share on social platforms, always responding to your messages with thoughtfulness that exceeds what casual interest would motivate is less than hashone. Zero hash is greater than always remembering details from previous conversations that reveal they're paying attention, they're absorbing what you share, they're holding you in their awareness between interactions rather than having to refresh their memory about who you are and what you've talked about each time you reconnect. Um, this level of attention isn't something people can fake long term, isn't something that happens accidentally, isn't something that emerges from politeness or obligation. It flows from genuine investment, from caring that creates natural desire to know you, to remember you, to track the details of your life because those details matter to someone for whom you matter. Watch for how they light up. When you enter space, they're already occupying physical shift in their energy, their posture, their facial expression that happens involuntarily when they see you, revealing that your presence affects them at level below conscious control, at level where body responds before mind can moderate response into something cooler, more collected, more socially appropriate if what they're actually feeling is intense enough to be embarrassing or overwhelming. This bodily response can't be faked convincingly, can't be sustained as performance. Either happens naturally because nervous system registers you as important, as exciting, as source of positive stimulation that creates measurable physiological changes. Or it doesn't happen, and when it does happen, when you catch that moment before they compose themselves into whatever persona they're maintaining, you're seeing truth about impact you have on them, truth that reveals their feelings have depth. Their words might not yet be expressing directly. Some people falling hard demonstrate it through what they're willing to sacrifice or adjust to accommodate you. They're rearranging plans, moving commitments, creating space and packed schedule because opportunity to see you, to spend time with you, to have your attention for however long you're available. That opportunity becomes priority that supersedes other priorities that would normally take precedence. This willingness to adjust, to accommodate, to put you first sometimes, or even frequently, signals that you're not just pleasant addition to their life, but central element they're organizing life around. Increasingly, whether consciously or unconsciously, whether they'd admit this if asked directly, or whether they'd minimize it to protect themselves from vulnerability of revealing how much you've come to matter, how much your presence or absence affects their sense of well being, how much they've come to depend on connection with you for something essential they're not getting elsewhere, something they didn't know they were missing until you provided it, and now they can't imagine going back to before you to version of their life where you weren't factor, weren't presence, weren't person they think about constantly and want to be around as much as possible. Still, others reveal depth through vulnerability they share with you specifically. They're telling you things they don't tell others, opening up about fears or hopes or wounds or dreams that they typically keep private. Trusting you with tender parts of themselves that they protect carefully in other relationships. And this selective vulnerability is choice, is gift, is indication that something about you, about your presence, about quality of attention you give them or safety you create through how you respond to their sharing makes them feel seen in ways that invite deeper revelation, deeper connection, deeper risk taking emotionally. Because when someone's falling hard, part of what they're falling toward is belief that this person, this specific person, might be safe enough, might be trustworthy enough, might be special enough to handle the undefended version of themselves, is less than #0. 5 is greater than. To meet vulnerability with care rather than judgment. To honor what's shared rather than using it as weapon later. To create relationship where masks can come off gradually and what's underneath gets welcomed rather than rejected. And that hope, that possibility, that growing belief that maybe your person they can actually be real with, that's part of what deepens feelings beyond casual interest into something substantial and profound. This reflection invites you to consider who in your current relational landscape demonstrates these patterns of consistency, bodily response, accommodation, or selective vulnerability specifically with you. Let me clarify what "they're falling hard" specifically reveals about the involuntary nature of their experience. Falling suggests lack of control, suggests gravity pulling them down, a trajectory they didn't choose consciously. And this involuntary quality is precisely what makes their feelings both more genuine and more vulnerable than attraction someone's cultivating deliberately. Attraction someone's choosing to pursue strategically, attraction that feels more like project than like something happening to them despite any resistance or hesitation they might feel. When someone's falling, they're not steering, they're not managing descent carefully, they're tumbling, accelerating, unable to slow momentum or change direction easily. And while falling can be exhilarating if they trust they'll land safely, if they believe you might catch them or at least that ground won't be devastating when they hit it, falling is also terrifying if they're unsure about reception they'll receive, unsure whether their feelings will be reciprocated, unsure whether vulnerability they're experiencing will be honored or exploited or simply rejected in ways that make falling feel like mistake, like weakness, like loss of dignity they'll regret once they've recovered enough to think clearly again about what possessed them, to let someone affect them this deeply in the fear that accompanies falling hard, especially for people who value control or who've been hurt before by loving someone who didn't love them back or who loved them back poorly. There's often resistance, fighting against the falling, efforts to slow descent, to grab onto something that stops or at least moderates the acceleration, to protect themselves from impact they're afraid might come. And this resistance might manifest as them pulling back periodically, creating distance after moments of intense connection, seeming confused or ambivalent about what they want from you, saying things that contradict their behavior because their words are trying to maintain safety, their actions keep abandoning in favor of moving closer to you, in favor of deepening connection. They tell themselves they should keep casual, but can't seem to keep casual because feelings have their own momentum that rational decision making can't fully control. If you've been experiencing this push pull dynamic, this hot and cold pattern that frustrates you because it feels like mixed signals, understand it might not be mixed signals so much as internal conflict. Someone falling despite fear, someone wanting you despite knowing wanting you is risky. Someone moving toward you while simultaneously trying to protect themselves from getting hurt by you not because you're intentionally threatening, but because anyone you're falling for has power to hurt you simply by not reciprocating, simply by not catching you, simply by letting you hit ground alone. It's essential you recognize that they're falling hard if that's what's happening, doesn't obligate your response, doesn't require you to catch them or fall with them or develop matching feelings just because their feelings are intense, is less than hash zero. 5 hashes greater than. You're allowed to not reciprocate, allowed to feel differently, allowed to be at different place emotionally, even if they're in deep water. And if that's your situation, if you're aware someone's falling for you, but you're not falling for them, kindness in your response matters. Clarity in your communication matters. Not leading them on matters. But you don't owe them feelings you don't have just because they have feelings they didn't plan to have. Feelings aren't something we can control or manufacture on demand. Feelings either are or aren't, and if yours aren't matching theirs, that's information both of you need to have clearly so they can decide how to proceed. Whether to create distance to let feelings fade, whether to maintain connection despite unrequited feelings, whether to speak their truth anyway, even knowing it might not be received how they hope, because sometimes speaking truth and being heard matters more than outcome. Sometimes vulnerability itself is gift, even when gift doesn't get returned in kind. Some people fall hard quickly, within weeks or even days of meaningful interaction. Their systems recognizing connection as significant, as rare, as something worth investing in fully without waiting for certainty or without protecting against disappointment. And this quick falling isn't necessarily less genuine than slow development, isn't necessarily infatuation that will burn out quickly, can be accurate assessment that chemistry is there, compatibility is there, potential is there. And wasting time being cautious makes less sense than leaning into what's obvious, what's undeniable, what feels right, even if it feels fast, even if it feels intense, even if it activates every wound around moving too quickly or trusting too readily, is less than hash zero. 5 hashes greater than. Because sometimes the risk of moving fast is less dangerous than risk of moving so slowly that momentum dies, that connection fades, that opportunity passes because both people were too careful to actually let something real develop between them. You might be dealing with exactly this kind of rapid onset deep feeling. Someone who's gone from barely knowing you to feeling like you're essential to them in compressed time frame that they might question themselves about, that they might wonder if they're being rash or naive, or if they're confusing intensity with actual compatibility. But time isn't only measure of depth. Sometimes people know quickly what others take months to discover. Sometimes recognition happens fast because compatibility is undeniable, because connection is obvious, because something about how you fit together makes sense at level that doesn't require extended verification period, just requires courage to acknowledge what's already clear, to speak what's already true, to act on feelings that aren't going away just because they arrived quickly. This reflection invites you to consider, if someone is falling for you hard and fast, how do you actually feel about them? And does their depth of feeling create pressure or excitement, or perhaps some combination of both? Let me address what "and it's deep" specifically indicates about the quality and sustainability of their feelings. Deep means their feelings have substance, have foundation, have roots, rather than being surface level attraction that's all intensity without actual basis in who you are is less than hash zero. 5 hash is greater than. And this depth emerges from them actually knowing you, actually seeing you, actually appreciating specific qualities rather than just projecting fantasy onto attractive stranger. Depth comes from accumulated time, from repeated interactions that reveal your character, from witnessing how you handle various situations that show them who you are when things are easy and who you are when things are hard, from conversations that go beyond small talk into territory where actual persons emerge from behind social performances, where vulnerabilities get shared, where values get revealed, where compatibility or incompatibility becomes evident through exploration that takes time and attention and genuine curiosity about other person. And when someone's feelings are deep, when they're based on actually knowing you rather than just being attracted to an idea of you, those feelings are more likely to sustain, more likely to weather challenges, more likely to mature into something lasting rather than burning bright briefly, than extinguishing. Once novelty fades, or once they discover you're human with flaws rather than perfect fantasy they imagined. In the distinction between infatuation and deep feeling, infatuation focuses on how someone makes you feel, how they enhance your life, how they serve your needs, while deep feeling focuses on who they are, what they value, how they move through world independently of their relationship to you. Deep feeling includes genuine care for their well-being, genuine interest in their growth, genuine appreciation for their autonomy, rather than just desire to possess them, to keep them close, to make them serve your emotional or physical needs without equal concern for theirs is less than hash zero. 5 hashes greater than. And when someone's feelings for you are deep, when they're falling hard in sustainable way, you'll notice they ask about your life, your dreams, your challenges, and they remember what you've told them and follow up later. They support your goals even when those goals don't directly benefit them. They encourage your growth, even when that growth might make you less dependent on them. They treat you as full person with rich internal life, rather than as object that exists primarily in relation to them, to their desires, to their needs that you might fulfill. It's critical you assess whether someone's deep feelings are healthy foundation for potential relationship or whether their depth is actually obsession disguised as love. And distinguishing between these requires examining whether their intensity respects your boundaries, whether their investment includes your actual well being or just their access to you, whether their falling for you includes seeing who you actually are, or whether they're falling for a version of you they've constructed that might have little resemblance to your actual self, your actual preferences, your actual needs that might not match what they imagine you need or want. Deep, healthy feelings make you feel seen, honored, respected, supported in being fully yourself. Deep, unhealthy feelings make you feel pressured, suffocated, objectified, reduced to role in someone else's narrative rather than recognized as autonomous being with your own narrative that they're privileged to participate in if you choose to grant that privilege. that you can revoke if participation stops serving you, stops honoring you, stops respecting your fundamental right to determine your own life, regardless of someone else's feelings about what they want from you or with you. Some deep feelings need time to be spoken. Person feeling them isn't ready to reveal depth yet because they're still processing it themselves, still figuring out if what they're feeling is real or if it will fade, still building courage to be vulnerable in ways that explicit confession requires. And if you're sensing someone's depth before they've spoken it, if you're picking up on their feelings before they've declared them explicitly, you have choice about whether to create opening for them to speak or whether to let them come to it in their own timing. Whether to acknowledge what you're sensing and invite conversation, or whether to maintain plausible deniability that lets both of you continue current dynamic without having to address elephant in room, without having to make decisions about what deep feelings mean for relationship, for future, for whether casual becomes serious, whether friendship becomes romance, whether current arrangement shifts into something different that requires different level of commitment, different level of vulnerability, different level of risk for both parties. This reflection invites you to consider, if you're aware of someone's deep feelings before they've spoken them directly, what do you want to do with that awareness and what would serve both of you best? Let me speak to what right now emphasizes about the immediacy and active nature of what's occurring. Right now means this isn't past history, isn't future possibility, isn't something that might develop eventually. This is current, active, present tense reality. They are falling as you hear these words. Their feelings are intensifying in this moment. Their emotional investment is deepening today, this week. This phase you're in together is less than has hone. Zero hash is greater than. And the immediacy of right now suggests that whatever you're going to do with this information, whatever response you're going to have to knowing someone's falling for you deeply, that needs to happen soon rather than being indefinitely postponed. Not because you have to rush into anything you're not ready for, but because someone in this kind of emotional state, someone whose feelings are active and intense and current, they're eventually going to need clarity from you. They're going to need to know where you stand. They're going to need response that lets them know whether what they're experiencing has any possibility of being mutual or whether they need to start the painful work of letting go, of creating distance, of protecting themselves from continuing to fall for someone who isn't going to catch them, who isn't available for relationship they're hoping for, who doesn't feel what they feel and isn't going to develop those feelings no matter how much time passes or how much effort they invest. In the responsibility you have when you become aware of someone's deep feelings, you don't have responsibility to reciprocate, to develop matching feelings just because theirs are intense. But you do have responsibility to be honest, to be clear, to not string them along if you know you're not interested, to not use their feelings for your benefit while giving them false hope about future that you know won't include them in way they're hoping for, to not be deliberately ambiguous to keep them orbiting you because their attention feels good even though you have no intention of actually being with them. In way their falling implies they want to be with you is less than hash zero. 5 hash is greater than. And this clarity, this honesty, this unwillingness to exploit someone's vulnerability for your ego or your entertainment or your need to feel desired. This is baseline decency that anyone falling for you deserves. That you'd want, if positions were reversed, that honors both their courage in developing feelings and your integrity in handling those feelings with care, even if you can't reciprocate them. It's important you examine your own feelings honestly rather than assuming you know how you feel, rather than dismissing possibility of reciprocation without actually checking in with yourself about whether you might be interested, might be developing feelings you haven't acknowledged yet, might be protected against feeling anything because you've been hurt before, or because you're scared, or because you've decided relationships aren't for you right now, even though maybe right relationship with right person might actually be something you'd be open to if you let yourself be open rather than staying defended against all possibility. Sometimes we miss connections we'd actually want because we're on autopilot saying no to everything, because we're so committed to being independent or guarded or single that we don't actually evaluate each opportunity, each person, each potential connection on its own merits. We just default to not interested without examining whether that's actually true or whether it's just protection mechanism operating automatically even when protection is no longer necessary. Even when the specific person in front of us isn't threat, isn't going to hurt us in ways we've been hurt before, might actually be safe person worth risking for. Some people discover they have feelings they didn't recognize only after becoming aware of other person's feelings. The revelation that someone's falling for them suddenly makes them examine their own experience differently, makes them notice that they think about this person frequently, that they light up when they see them, that they prioritize time with them, that maybe what they've been calling a friendship or casual connection actually has romantic potential. They haven't been acknowledging. And if this is your experience, if knowing someone's falling for you is making you realize you might have feelings too, that's valid. That's worth exploring. Don't dismiss it as just reactive or as just responding to being desired. Sometimes we need permission from someone else's vulnerability to access our own feelings. Sometimes we need to know we're not alone in experiencing attraction or connection before we'll admit to ourselves that we're experiencing it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing inauthentic about discovering your feelings through someone else, revealing theirs first. Feelings are allowed to develop in any order, through any process. What matters is whether they're genuine once you recognize them, whether they're substantial enough to act on, whether they're reciprocal enough to build something mutual, rather than one person always more invested than the other. This reflection invites you to consider, knowing that someone might be falling for you deeply right now, how does that information land in your body, in your heart? Does it create excitement or pressure or curiosity or discomfort or perhaps layered response that includes multiple feelings simultaneously? Let me address what the ocean wave emoji suggests about the emotional intensity and its potential to overwhelm. Wave imagery invokes power, momentum, force that can't be stopped once it's building. And someone's deep feelings, when they reach certain intensity, have exactly this quality of tidal force, of something larger than individual choice or intention, something that sweeps both people up if connection becomes mutual, something that can be beautiful and terrifying simultaneously. Beautiful because being swept up in powerful connection with someone is exhilarating, is alive, is a reminder that being human means being subject to forces beyond our control, including forces of attraction, attachment, love, that arrive uninvited and remake us whether we're ready or not. Terrifying because losing control means vulnerability, means trusting that wave will carry you somewhere good rather than dashing you against rocks, means surrendering to experience you can't fully direct, can't fully predict, can't fully protect yourself from if it turns out poorly, if feelings aren't reciprocated, if connection that feels profound to you doesn't feel profound to other person, if you're drowning in emotions they're barely wading in. And that asymmetry, that possibility of loving someone more than they love you, of needing someone more than they need you, of being changed by someone who remains relatively unchanged by you, that's the danger in the wave. That's the legitimate fear that makes people resist falling, even when falling would be most honest response to what they're experiencing. In the invitation to ride the wave rather than fighting it, if the wave is happening to you, if you're the one falling, or if you're falling mutually with someone who's also falling, there's wisdom in surrender, in letting yourself feel what you feel without constant internal debate about whether you should feel it is less than has home. Zero hash is greater than, whether it's smart or safe or well timed, whether you can afford to be this affected by another person when you've worked hard to be self sufficient, to need no one, to protect yourself from being dependent on anyone else's presence or attention or love for your fundamental well being. The wave doesn't care about your self sufficiency, doesn't respect your independence, doesn't honor your carefully constructed walls. It just comes, it just rises, it just builds until you either dive into it and swim with its current or try to fight it and exhaust yourself resisting force that's stronger than your resistance. That will eventually overwhelm your defenses, whether you cooperate with it or spend all your energy trying to prevent what's already happening, what's already real, what's already changing you, whether you give it permission or not. It's critical you assess whether this particular wave is one you want to ride, whether this particular person whose feelings are deep and whose intensity is building is someone you actually want to explore connection with, or whether their depth is creating obligation you feel to reciprocate even though your authentic feeling is that you're not interested, not available, not in place where deep connection serves you, regardless of how much it might serve them. Not every wave is meant for you. Not every deep feeling directed at you requires your matching depth. You're allowed to say, I see your feelings, I honor your feelings, I'm not available for those feelings. And that boundary, while it might hurt them, while it might disappoint them, while it might end or fundamentally change relationship you currently have, that boundary is more respectful than false reciprocation is less than hash zero. 5 hash is greater than pretending depth you don't feel, than getting involved with someone out of guilt or obligation or loneliness or ego gratification, rather than genuine mutual desire for connection with this specific person at this specific time in ways that serve both people, rather than just serving one person's needs while leaving other person diminished, used, settling for crumbs while pretending they're getting full meal. May you see clearly who's falling. May you know clearly what you feel. May you act clearly from that knowing. May you honor both their depth and your truth, regardless of whether truth is reciprocation or gentle decline. Someone's falling hard for you. It's deep, it's real, it's happening now. What you do with this information matters. Choose wisely, choose honestly, choose with care for both hearts involved. Remember this: someone falling for you is gift, is honor, is vulnerability offered that deserves care, regardless of whether you can receive it as they hope. And your response, whatever it is, should honor that vulnerability, should treat their feelings as precious. Even if you can't reciprocate them, should never mock or exploit or take for granted what it costs someone to fall for another person. To risk rejection, to expose their heart, to say through feelings, if not through words, you matter to me, you affect me, you've become essential in ways I didn't plan and can't control, and am trusting you to handle with care even though you didn't ask for this responsibility, didn't sign up to catch me, might not want what I'm offering. If you can catch them, if your feelings match theirs, if mutual depth creates foundation for relationship that serves both of you, is less than #0. 5# is greater than. Then dive into the wave. Let it carry you both. Trust that being swept up together is different from drowning alone. Trust that mutual falling creates safety net where you catch each other, where neither person hits ground alone because you're descending together, landing together, building something together from the pieces of who you were before you met, before you fell, before everything changed. Because this person entered your life and became someone you can't imagine your life without, someone whose absence would leave whole, someone whose presence makes everything better, richer, more meaningful, more worth showing up for day after day after day. Plot twist, they're falling hard. It's deep, it's real, it's overwhelming them. Right now, as you read this, what happens next is partly yours to determine.